This was another quick, basically one combat session, because a couple of us were short on time. We had to get somewhere, but it was a pretty good combat. I think my players enjoyed it. Um, it started off as a bit of a trap. There were a bunch of goblins that were tied up with like weapons attached to their hands that they weren't intending to use, and they were afraid. And once my players got up to these goblins and investigated them, they noticed this, and they sprung the trap. There was a bugbear hiding in basically a tiger pit right behind them, and I was so excited to run my bugbear after I had made it. I was sort of inspired by how bugbears are brutes, but they're also sneaky. And the stat block, the bugbear I made, was all about that. Basically, I thought about what is the worst thing a brute could do if it was able to also be stealthy, right? I mean, that's basically what your mind would go to. And I thought the the worst, most damaging thing it could do would be to creep up behind the casters and or the backline guys, whatever they were, and just start wreaking havoc on them. And I imagined this creature just bullying them, just like throwing them around, like knocking them into each other, all of that. And that's what inspired the stat block, is kind of like a grappler, but also with sneak attack. And if you think about it, those mechanics actually go hand in hand pretty well, being a grappler and sneak attacking, because one of the big things that you try to do when you're grappling somebody is to knock them down on the ground. And when you're prone, you get attacked with advantage. Like whoever's attacking you gets advantage on their attacks, which would mean that sneak attack goes off. So it makes for this very brutal, synergistic set of moves that the bugbear can do. And I gave him a couple of throws. The thing that made it tricky, he didn't get to be quite as brutal as I wanted him to be, on account of the moves that I gave him. He grappled, and that was a strength contest against whoever he was trying to grapple, which is fine. That's how it normally works. But then the throws that I gave him also required a strength contest, which was kind of difficult. It made it difficult for them to actually like land those attacks. But it's also kind of balanced out as like, if it wasn't going to be a strength contest, it would have just been an attack roll. So I don't really know if it made that much of a difference, but it didn't feel great when I would like succeed all of the strength contests to get them in the hold, but then fail the strength contest to actually throw them, because it meant that my bad guy didn't really get to do his thing. It kind of also became another dogpile situation, but it wasn't really because I didn't set up the combat to be difficult enough, because the party members were outnumbered if you counted these like goblin prisoners who were sort of set up as a trap. But my players decided that their goal was going to be to free slash convert these goblins. And it kind of provided like a good story beat where Boblin the Goblin was able to influence these other goblins to kind of like fight back against the bugbear. So all in all, it ended up being like a dog pile on the bugbear, which I never like when it ends up like that. But one of my players gifted me a situation by blowing the goblin sentry horn that they had picked up at some point, and that gave me an excuse to add more bad guys to the fight. Now, one encounter I was thinking of ahead of time was, I thought it would be funny to have some goblins who are they kind of take on human roles. And I thought one that I had thought of was a goblin cowboy. And I was like, that would be a fun character. But I also thought it would be funny if he wasn't like a boss or anything. I didn't make a special stat block for him. I just used my stat block that I had for a goblin gunner, and I just reskinned him into basically a guy who sounded like Matt Mercer doing a cowboy voice. And he was really cool, and all my players thought he was a really great character. but also he was just going to die very easily because he was just a normal reskinned enemy, not a boss or anything. But my players were all convinced that he was meant to be some kind of boss. The fight played out really well, and they ended up actually really liking this character of this goblin cowboy. And then when they beat him, I described that he kind of slides off of his saddle and he was riding like a wolf, right? Because goblins don't do horses. He slides off his wolf, Skeeter, and he like cuts off the saddle and he lets Skeeter go free. And he's like sitting there bleeding out, and my players even wanted to do a medicine check on him to heal him. And deciding DCs on checks is always tricky for me, because it's something that you do sort of have to improvise. If they say, I want to do a skill check, you kind of have to decide in the moment, okay, how difficult is this going to be? And sometimes in the moment, with the pacing and not wanting to slow things down too much, and maybe just me sort of jumping the gun, and maybe I should just sit on it and think about it more. I will choose a DC, and then they'll make their roll, and then I'll decide after they make their roll, like, I would have liked it if that was a little more difficult or a little easier or whatever. And it makes the whole thing seem kind of fake when I decide, like, after the fact, like, it wasn't written down or anything, it was just a DC. For example, when they did this medicine check, I think I decided on a DC like 15, but I didn't feel super settled on that in my mind. I just kind of said to the player, okay, make your roll. And I think he beat it, but I was like, I think I want this character to die. I think it would be like kind of a funny / dramatic moment depending on how they took it. And like I thought it would be more dramatically satisfying if the character just like bled out in front of him. So I sort of like retroactively changed the DC to like 18. And I don't know if other DMs do that, but I've done that like a few times now. Maybe I just need to commit harder and have somewhere just behind the DM screen where I can quickly write down to DC and just make sure that I, own up to that. It's not that they really know, but sometimes I will tell my players the DC of a check, just because I think it maybe adds something. I think if I knew as a player what I'm trying to beat, then it would feel cooler if I did it, or maybe even feel worse if I didn't, depending on if it was a lower DC, right? And it would also keep me a little more honest, because I would have to like commit and say like, oh, this is the DC of it, and if you roll higher than that, you will get it, right? So maybe that's the solution. In a situation like that, I could just say out loud, this is the DC that you're trying to beat, and then see if they do it. I think that would be overall more satisfying in a situation like that. Anyway, they had this great dramatic moment where the character dies, and like one of my players like took 2 of his gold coins and like put it over the cowboy's eyes. It's just kind of weird, but it was very funny and satisfying. There's not a whole lot else to report on. It was just a cool combat. My players liked it.